Okay, so there's a few things you can do which break the whole kind of asset export process, and probably the most common one is when you bring something in that already has, say, a texture applied to it, and as you export, even though you can't see any of that, as you export the model, that tends to go through with it, and you get an error when you try to bring you don't actually get the error until you bring it into the Fire editor. So I'm going to try and replicate it. I mean, I'm not sure I'll be able to, but I'm going to see if I can basically break it. So I'm just going to get rid of that, and I'm going to import this new version of the chair. So test chair UV FBX. So this has come in with basically a texture applied, a UV texture applied, and this texture is not applied to the right type of shader. And it's also a JPEG, which, none of that's going to go down particularly well. So I've gone through exactly the same process before. I don't really want this texture anymore, so I've set up a new shader, and I'm going to apply my new shader, which is that. So you'd think, yeah, that's all fine. If I go to export this, file, export selection, I'm going to call it test chair. Export it, yes, and everything seems to be fine. So hopefully if I take it now to the Fire editor, well, hopefully it'll break so I can show you it breaking, but you never know with these things. Okay, so we've got Fire editor open. If I go to asset, right click, import assets, and I'm going to go to where my models are kept, which is in Documents, Media, Boards, bottom, test chair. So we get this Fire asset processor state, failed to map file. Test chair UV temp for D3D11 is the file under your base path. So it basically can't find the map you're looking for because it is it's in a completely different place. So that's one thing. So one thing you need to check for is that if you're going to get errors where it's looking for the file under your base path, basically within the structure of the relative path structure that you've got, this is looking for a texture which actually lives on the desktop. You can see where it is here, which is our original folder. In fact, I can show you. It's there, that's the one. But that's not where the rest of the stuff is, so it doesn't know where to look for it. But also it's a JPEG, so it's not going to like that either. If I add this instance, it will actually allow me to add it, so it's not so broken that it can't. That it's going to completely fail. But you do get this sometimes where it's looking for things in the wrong place and it completely fails, and sometimes you see it, I don't know if it'll show it, but sometimes you get this thing where it basically shows the texture is actually broken. It's not really liking this very much anyway. Look at the interest. It's actually not showing up too bad on this, but sometimes you get like a checkerboard. If it's got a missing texture, it'll have a checkerboard that runs through the actual object, and it's usually because it can't find something. If you want to have no problems whatsoever, the best thing to do, which is kind of where we're getting to, is when you go to here, you want to, if I open up the render editors, if I go to Hypershade, if you look in here, these are basically all the textures that we've got in this scene. Now, the Lambert and this particle one and this, you can't do anything about. This is the material we've created, which is this one. But this is still here, it's still hanging about, and that's why it looks for it. Because when you export the scene, it's still exporting this out, even though it's not attached to the shape, to the actual object. So you can either go through this and delete these manually, just by hitting delete, and that should solve it. Or you can do this. You can go to delete unused shader nodes, and if you just click this, so when you've made your model, if you just click this, it will basically look for all the shaders that are not attached to the object, and it will jib the lot. And that's really useful. So I would always click on this, unless you know you haven't got anything applied to it. But it doesn't hurt to do it anyway. Thing to watch for is if you've got a scene and you've changed some things and you've not applied the shaders to it yet, because if you hit this, it will just delete them. It's indiscriminate. Right, so if I click that now and do export selection, test chair, export selection, yes. Okay, so we've got a new instance of the Fire editor. Let's bring this asset in so it's all nice and clean now. Documents, fill media, media, models, test chair, that one, open him. And as you can see, nothing, no issues at all, just came in first time. So add the instance and we'll have no problems with that. So that just makes it nice and clean. So that's probably something you should do every time. Okay, cheers.